conversation and excitement. We're very happy that you could join us for our open house and our new digs. We're very excited. We want to especially thank the city for helping us achieve this by increasing our funding for this last year, which we've done by investing in a new full-time marketing and program director, and also in some space that will allow us to do some training, one-on-one training, small group training, coaching, and so forth. We're very excited about the opportunities for this space. We made I think the investments have proved very good. We've already been using the space. Conrad has been in here making flyers and printing flyers. We've had a few small neighborhood meetings here. Our board meets here. I would like to recognize our board of directors who are here, those who are here. So I'll start with our president, Ron Silverman. Our fund development director, and very helpful in getting this set up for me, Carla Riley.
Vice President.
Kia Young, who's our secretary, and NLA chairperson, and Nick Pittman, who's immediate past president. And Alpina Aldrich, representing the city of South Bend. Am I missing anybody? So I know many of you, or most of you, my brother's ages.
Hello.
So very happy to see you here. But Scott has put together a great presentation about what we've been up to, what we're doing now, and what our vision is for this space. So I'm going to turn it over to his very competent hands.
Oh, I'll make that judgment after I'm done. Thank you, Dinah. Thank you all for coming. This is really exciting. I'm excited to be in the new space, and I'm excited to see all of the support. I want to spend just a few minutes, as Diana said, summarizing what we've been up to, and then kind of summarize where we're headed. First of all, if there are any of you who aren't familiar with what NRC is and what we do, we begin with the premise that neighborhoods, while they can be improved somewhat from the outside, that's not the critical ingredient. We know that what it takes to improve neighborhoods is organization from the inside. And that means neighbors taking it upon themselves to make their own neighborhood a better place. So what NRC does is we help those neighbors build better neighborhoods. And we do it a few ways. We do it with leadership training, we do it with coaching, we do it with small grant programs and several other resources. Ultimately, the goal is to help those neighbors organize and become the representative voice of their neighborhood. So here's a little bit about what we've done recently, what we're doing now, and where we're going. So let's start with first things first. What we've done recently. Well, there's a lot, right? So there's a whole bunch of what we can kind of call the usual. If we say recently is the beginning of 2017, we've done 2 neighborhood leadership academies, we've done 2 of our Engaging Youth, Engaging Neighborhoods, we've done a handful of workshops last summer with another slate of workshops coming here shortly. We've done quarterly roundtables, we've issued several small grants, we've done one-on-one advising already. We've had one trivia out around the bend with another one to come shortly, and of course Tapas and Tango every year. So a remarkable amount of activity from a relatively small organization. But I blazed through that because I want to talk to you about not the things that most of you already know about because you've seen them up front. What I want to talk to you about is what we've been doing behind the scenes, right? While we've been doing all those things, we've been doing some other strategic work as well. To give you the insight into that strategic work, I want to begin with a little bit of background. Those of you who've been in South Bend for the past 10 or 15 years will kind of know where neighborhood services in South Bend have come from. Back in the early 2000s, neighborhood assistance was provided at partnership centers. There were 5 different partnership centers in the city. Each partnership center was either a rehabilitated house or in this case a storefront. They served as points of contact in the neighborhoods, and that's key. They were locations for neighbors to go to. They were staffed. They actually had people there to help neighborhood associations function, grow, and do all those things that they need to do well. Partnership centers went away, I think, 2007? The funding realities were such that they were removed. NRC's services then consolidated down to a centralized model. And instead of having that contact with individual neighborhoods, we were then charged with helping those neighborhoods, but doing it from one location, but reaching out citywide. the reality of that meant that we had to change our programs. And the Neighborhood Leadership Academy was started partly in response to that. In 2011, the Neighborhood Leadership Academy, which is a multi-week neighbor leader training program that reaches citywide, and it's meant to be kind of a comprehensive program that in many respects is kind of all things to all people. And that's a good thing because it's comprehensive, but it's also less than ideal in the sense that it doesn't meet those individual neighborhoods or those neighborhood associations where they are when they are. Well, 2011, fast forward to 2017. About 6 cohorts later of the Neighborhood Leadership Academy, we've got several dozen alumni. That's an average of 1 program every year. A very successful program in its own right, but a couple of challenges by 2017 were kind of emerging. The first challenge was that due to NRC's small size, the program was coordinated by volunteers. It was presented by volunteers. Over time, that's not necessarily that sustainable. And the other challenge is because we were no longer in the neighborhoods like we used to be, we had a hard time understanding whether or not the program was having the kind of impact that we knew the program wanted to have. So in 2017, NRC made the decision to hire an instructional designer whose role it would be to do 2 things, both be the staff person that coordinates the program and to take a look at the program and do the kind of assessment that answers that question, is the program having the impact that we want it to have? That was me. So, let's assess, shall we? And that's what instructional designers do well. That assessment took 2 forms. The first thing that an instructional designer will do is answer an important question. Before we design any program that's designed to create healthy neighborhood organizations, we have to stop and ask, okay, what does a healthy neighborhood organization look like? What are those objective criteria? For example, if a neighborhood association, if you're talking about the leadership, one of the objective criteria might be, is there a deep leadership bench on the good side of the spectrum? Or is it just 1 or 2 leaders at the top who are really doing all the work? That's the less constructive side of the spectrum. So coming up with those kind of objective criteria, that was no easy task, but creating that tool that we could use both internally and externally for neighborhood associations to kind of gauge their own health, that's why we call it the Neighborhood Association Health Check. Making that tool was the important first step. The second step, using that tool. Okay, if we have this objective assessment, how do the neighborhoods compare? That's the task that we took on at that point. This is our old office space. We call it the whiteboard room, and you're not even seeing the 3rd wall, right? And Lauren, I remember, I covered the wall in this room with my, Russell Crowe, whatever, beautiful, for weeks, it was plastered with our notes because Diane and I sat down, neighborhood by neighborhood, every single neighborhood, we used those criteria to say, okay, how are they doing? There's a color coding. You can see there, green means good, yellow means red, pink means needs improvement in each of those criteria. And these are the results. And I want to say what we learned, although learned is not the right word, it's what I learned because I'm new. I think it's what Diana knew all along because she's been doing this for years. But the picture that emerged, what I thought we would see is that there were certain subject matters that we would teach neighborhoods to better serve them. Leadership, or how to write bylaws, or things like that. And that those patterns would emerge horizontally. That's not what happened. What we saw in the data is that neighborhood organizations that did well in any particular area tended to do well all the way down the column. Whereas neighborhood organizations that tended to have an issue anywhere in particular tended to have issues all the way down. What does that tell us? It tells us that our needs are not to serve subject by subject, but to be there at the neighborhood by neighborhood level because each organization is different. So I'm like, well, this is interesting. What are these patterns telling us? Well, institutionally, Diana knows what those patterns are telling us. There are some common threads in this. There is a pattern that we can kind of read the tea leaves from. Neighborhood organizers that come together to solve problems in their neighborhood that usually don't begin with the idea of a neighborhood association in mind. They don't start with, hey, let's write some bylaws and let's hold elections. They usually rally around an issue, right? Potholes, crime, whatever the issue is, people come together and say, let's fix something. Those are the core organizers. But in order to be a healthy, strong neighborhood association, to have that deep leadership bench, to have the communications best practices, you've got to reach a higher level. And we call this reaching escape velocity, right? Because it's a good term, right? In order to make that shift in focus, you got to have some forward momentum. And what we realized is that neighborhood associations tended to not necessarily reach that escape velocity. They weren't growing beyond that core organizer state to be a sustainable, well-organized neighborhood association. So there's the issue. It was clear. So we had two takeaways. Number one, existing organizations aren't reaching that escape velocity, which means NRC needs to connect with them where they are when they are. The second thing we knew was, remember all that white space on this spreadsheet? These are all neighborhoods where there's nothing. There's literally not a single person that we're aware of serving in a neighborhood organization capacity. That means 50% of South Bend neighborhoods are completely unserved. That's a lot of fertile ground, right? So the second takeaway for us was to be there to connect with those neighborhoods. That's where we need to be. So if you want to state that takeaway differently, NRC needs to build, or in some cases, rebuild relationships at that neighborhood level. So that's what we've been doing, is making that picture a little more clear. So now what are we doing about it? Here's what we're doing. The first thing we did was redesign our Neighborhood Leadership Academy. And this is actually kind of a past tense kind of thing because we've already done that. We divided the academy into 2 sessions. The first program, which we just wrapped up last fall, we kind of call it the Beginning Academy. Right on, brother. The Beginning Academy focuses on those core organizers when they're just getting started and they want to rally around an issue. How do they work with local government? How do they just get organized? That's the starting point. The Advanced Academy deals with shifting your focus to being the representative voice of the neighbors, taking your attention from what it is you wanted in the first place to what your neighbors want for the neighborhood, and that's an important shift in focus. We've restructured the academy to reflect that. What we're also doing is increasing our one-on-one support, doing a better job as we can, because we now have some staff bandwidth, to get out there and meet the neighbors in the neighborhoods where they are. For example, Near West Side Neighborhood Organization really underwent some leadership transition, and we were there to kind of help coach them with that. It could have been politically difficult, but everybody really got through it well, partly because there was some support behind the scenes. North Shore Triangle is heading towards a similar circumstance, except we're ahead of it this time, and we're able to sit down with them and do a little bit of work on their nominating committee. Kennedy Park, we're helping them with some communications and doing some Facebook work and video work. And then finally, we worked recently with Monroe Park. Sorry. We worked with Monroe Park to do a fundraising workshop. And speaking of Monroe Park, one of the capacities we have here in-house at NRC, helping with communications, is to help neighborhood associations get the word out using video. So Monroe Park's a very small association, but we hopefully made them look a little bigger recently at their cleanup.
Picking up trash. We're cleaning up our neighborhood. Monroe Park.
If your bag gets too full, just bring it to a corner somewhere and leave it there, and we will come by and pick it up.
Why are we doing this? Cleanliness is next to godliness. How about that?
For the picture, make your bag look full. 1, 2, 3. Monroe Park!
It's a historical neighborhood. It has a lot of beautiful old homes in it. It has a lot of people that have been in the neighborhood for years and years.
We're out here cleaning up the neighborhood, making it's a beautiful neighborhood, and there should be no trash in it.
When you see that something's taken care of, you know that people care about it, and that'll make you care about it and give it some thought before you go past and just throw your McDonald's out.
We got to stay on top of it. At least once a year, twice a year, it's a good thing to do.
If there's more, we can always come back and pick up more, but it's to instill a desire for people to keep your neighborhood clean.
I don't know if you can see this number here, but it's 3,345 people reached. That's a legit number. So hopefully this kind of publicity will help Monroe Park get some momentum moving forward. What we're doing now is also giving those neighborhoods where there is no current neighborhood organization some tools to get one started. When those handful of neighbors want to come together and get started, but they don't have access to a pop-up canopy or a table or a PA system or any of those things that you might host a block party with, because a block party is a great way to get your neighborhood started, we have those things available for you to borrow. This is a brand new program that we just launched recently, so if you want to have a neighborhood association event, if the purpose of the event is to grow your organization, see us and you can borrow the toolkit. What we're also doing right now is revisiting our Engaging Youth, Engaging Neighborhoods program. There's a little bit of a leadership change from Notre Dame's side. As you know, it's a partnership with Notre Dame, which provides us an opportunity to revisit the program and determine how can we get this very popular program broader exposure to the city of South Bend and increase the diversity among it. And then finally, what we're doing now is continuing the workshop series. You can look for our marketing to drop for the upcoming workshop series right around the first of the month, which is, wow, like 4 days from now. Okay,
That's okay.
Moving on.
You've been busy.
We all have things to do, so let's, but you can look forward to some of these workshops being promoted here later in the fall. That's what we're doing now. So a little bit about where we're going. As you know now, all of this has kind of a strategy in mind. We want to keep going with it. The Block Party Toolkit has been well received, and so we're looking to hopefully create a couple of other toolkits. Neighborhood cleanups are a very popular way for a neighborhood organization to get going. And also, if you want to have a meeting, we actually have the meeting toolkit already put together. We just haven't marketed it. So a projector like this, we have a few of them. Some of those easels to brainstorm onto, several of those. Those are also available. And then where we're going, the large multi-week neighborhood leadership training program that is Neighborhood Leadership Academy is great, but the subject matter is important enough to neighborhood associations that we want to package it up and put it out there differently. So we want to create a stronger, more robust online guidebook for neighborhood organizers to use to just get started. I mentioned the health check, also putting that tool out there for neighborhood associations to kind of gauge their effectiveness. The Block Party Guidebook is a kind of a how-to manual for doing a block party. I mentioned the Revised Organizer's Handbook, and then putting the Neighborhood Leadership Academy modules online is also what we're planning to do later this year. And then more just-in-time training. We mentioned the importance of connecting with neighborhoods individually. This room you're standing in is our resource room, and it is the place where we now can offer training to any neighborhood association depending on what their needs are, what they would like for us to assist them with. Training for up to 8 in this space anytime. Just let us know how we can help, and we're here to do it for you. Or on location, if you'd like us to come to you, we're now able to do that as well with that meeting toolkit. And of course, we want to activate those unserved neighborhoods, right? 50% of South Bend neighborhoods have no organization. So by the end of this year, early next year, we would like to have created a program whereby we can go into those neighborhoods and kind of activate them. Come together, find out what are their ideas, what do they want to see in their neighborhood, and who are the leaders that can step up and maybe come together and form that core organizing group. So a program that kind of plants those seeds is something that we're looking forward to creating also. That's where we're going, and I'd be remiss if we didn't also add one more category, and that's where we hope to go. These are things that aren't necessarily on the definite to-do list, but we want them to be. And I know this sounds like this is where we're about to ask you for money. We're not. We're not about to pass a bucket, but we do want everybody to understand that right now, neighborhoods working with NRC, it's completely up to them. Like it's completely voluntary. It's the benefit of our organization that is the carrot, if you will. But right now, although we do offer some small grants for things like block parties, it's also true that in other cities you see that the neighborhood associations, every one of them that's registered, for example, might receive a certain minimum of financial support. Just enough to help them do those best practices that we want to expect of them. If we want them to communicate with their neighbors, how do they do that? Is there at least a postcard in their mail once a year? Well, that costs postage. So having the funds available to all of those neighborhood associations to encourage them to do those best practices, to actually be in the habit of sending that postcard, that's a place we'd like to be. So we'd like to promulgate what those minimum expectations are, but then offer them some carrots in return. That's where we'd really like to get to. So with that in mind, we want to say we've done a lot recently. We're working on a lot now. We have a little bit left to go, a lot left to go actually. And for those of you who are here supporting us, we want to say thank you. We look forward to your continued support as we go forward. And I'll turn it back over to Diana.
I don't really have a lot more to add. Scott did a pretty good job of summing everything up. Another thing we used to do, we'd like to return to be able to do, is send neighbors to conferences, the Regional Neighbor Network Conference, perhaps the Neighbors USA Conference. Neighbors went to that, came back with a lot of good ideas. Viola's nodding in her head. She came back with lots of great ideas from attending those conferences. Did you go with us?
The armadillo.
The armadillo. The armadillo actually came back from a neighborhood conference. It was introduced by Monroe Park Neighbor at one of our roundtables, which is one of the things we do quarterly, is bring neighbors from around the community together to get to know each other better, to learn how they can connect and have more power in their collective voice together, if you will. So we would like to have some funding for that as well, so that's what we're going to be working on, is trying to find some funding to help that. And we'd love to have, and we may have, we're working with an organization for this, that works for the state of Indiana, or well, doesn't work for the state, but they're a statewide organization called Prosperity Indiana. And if we get a grant with them through First Source Bank, we might get an AmeriCorps volunteer from January through August in 2019. So we're very excited about that, because that person can help us go out and connect to the neighborhoods even better than we can with just the two of us trying to do that. So that's a couple of other things that we're looking at. So we appreciate that. So you can help us by your continued support and sharing the word, and thank you again for being here. And if you haven't had any food, it's down the hall and in the conference room. And thank you again.
Thank you.